Hello and welcome to the 46 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. It is Super Regional Week. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Soldier Sports, Tecovas Boots, and Academy Sports and Outdoors. I am joined by your three favorite Americans, Big Tex, Zebby Barrels, and the owner-operator of the JoJo Joes, Mr. Sauce. Gentlemen, how we doing? Good evening.
I was doing fine until you said we're only going to have 46 minutes of heaven because some of our friends here in the comments don't want us to rush this thing. We don't want time limits.
Well, if people do follow the pod, they know that when I say 46 minutes, you can go ahead and tack on a good 13
Mark
to 15
S says
minutes.
that Mark S says that if we're willing to stay on for 4 hours, he is too.
All right.
Mark S celebrates Festivus every day. I got a lot of problems with you people.
Oh, I got a bone to pick.
I feel like this is going to be a good podcast, guys.
That's right. Yeah, I was just going to say the theme for this podcast. Let's get weird. All right, boys, we're gonna rip around the country. It's scramble piece week. I got home last night and was home today, and I'm going back to the airport tomorrow. These are problems that I pray for. Super excited to be doing that. And then we will be off to the Ha, as the great Kyle J. Peterson would say. We're off to the middle of the country. Oh,
does he actually call it the Ha?
I think so. And the what's the other thing they call?
Who calls it that?
Kyle.
He says
Omaha.
Kyle calls it the Ha.
I challenge. I'm throwing the challenge.
Omaha.
Okay. Well, we will get confirmation on that in the Hilton Omaha bar over a Gatorade. Boys, let's preview the Super Regionals, but by doing that, I would like us to reflect upon the regionals that the teams came from, if you don't mind. No time limit. Take 30 minutes per pod if you like. Dealer's choice. I want you to use your best discretion. KR, I'll put it up for bid. Who would like the Louisville-Miami Super Regional matchup? Who feels well schooled there? Fitzy, is that your beat?
I can actually, I can do this.
Do it,
one.
Joe. Do it.
Because I think this was a regional that was going to get played on Vanderbilt's terms for good or for bad. Because the Vanderbilt that we had seen the last 3 to 4 weeks was a Vanderbilt that could get to Omaha, that could be kind of frisky in Omaha. They were starting to impact the baseball a little bit more. The lineup had come along. RJ Austin was swinging the bat better. And then the pitching had been what it had been. And if anything, I think they'd figure some more things out. They were starting to maybe take the training wheels off of Austin Nye a little bit more. And I thought he could be a useful piece. The bullpen is incredible, all that stuff. And yet they get into this regional, and it was kind of like the Vanderbilt of mid-March where, the offense just wasn't there. And they frankly got kind of fortunate to win the game they won because, we'll never know, but if Bright State doesn't, pull a starting pitcher who had a no-hitter going, we don't need to relitigate that, but maybe they don't even win the opener against Wright State. So, you could make an argument. Wright State just about outplayed them twice. So this Vanderbilt that showed up was just not the Vanderbilt that we saw in Hoover. And that was, to me, the difference. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Louisville. I thought they pitched incredibly well, in particular. And I think that's interesting if they're going to pitch like that, because I do like the position player group that Louisville has, Louisville brings to the table. If they're going to pitch like that, it's a different deal altogether. I think they got 7 innings out of Patrick Forbes, which is like the hardest part for Patrick Forbes. The getting outs is not necessarily the problem. It's getting outs, beyond the 5th inning. So if they're going to pitch like that, I think Louisville is dangerous. But to me, this was about if Vanderbilt showed up and played like they did in Hoover, I think they were going to be fine, but they did not. This was a Vanderbilt that we saw earlier in the year, and it wasn't good enough. And Louisville played well enough to take advantage of that, and maybe caught a break by the fact that Wright State played just well enough to stick around late in this thing, and then didn't have the depth to finish it off. But that's the way regionals work, and they don't have to apologize for that. And now it's created a kind of a fun, unexpected all ACC matchup in Super Regionals. So I think it'd be a cool story if Louisville is able to get back to Omaha, even with the team I think that we weren't really sure had that kind of ceiling.
And certainly, I don't think we thought that this was going to be a Miami team that was going to be 2 wins from Omaha. I mean, this was a transition year. It was a year with this dramatic turnover on the roster. It was a very up and down season. Started off quite poor. Well, I mean, really, like started off conference play quite poorly. Even just the 2 weeks before conference. I mean, they went through a good stretch, like 5-6 weeks there where they just seemed irrelevant. Like this team is not going to be a contender, and then they kind of turned it on middle of the year. Duke, Georgia Tech, NC State winning those series, Boston College, and then they finished poorly again, right? And it's like, I for one totally jumped off the Miami ship after they lost the Notre Dame series and got swept at UVA. It's like, all right, whatever. Like that's over. They had their run, and then they get to the regional, and I mean, as a 3 seed, one of the last teams in the field, and they just kind of they figure it out. They start to play some pretty good team offense. It's not. Listen, there's no Yonder Alonso and Jamal Weeks down there. It's not Blake Ducote. I mean, it's not like vintage Miami, but this is a team that has one star in the middle with Daniel Cuvée, and you've got a spark plug at the top with Jonathan Ogden. And you got, some nice veteran guys like Dorian Gonzalez and some pieces who can offense a little bit. I do think their defense is very good up the middle for the most part. Cuvée is better than you think at third base. And their bullpen is a strength. And when you get length out of Griffin Hughes, like they got in the regional, that's huge. And obviously AJ Siskar is a true freshman, but he's a really good freshman. And, he was very good against Alabama. And so you look up and you got a 1-2 punch. You got a bullpen that can shorten the game. You can mix and match. I mean, I think they got 3 innings out of Will Smith in the regional clincher. Like they've got a few guys in there kind of building up to Brian Walters that they like. I mean, it's not the sexiest Miami team. It's, it feels like what it was, a middle of the pack ACC team, but they're playing well at the right time. And it's kind of like the SEC, those middle of the pack to even, second half of the league teams in the ACC can be dangerous when they're playing well, just like they can in the SEC. We've seen that time and again. In the SEC, like teams that barely get in the tournament, get hot, play well at the right time, and they make a run to Omaha. And it kind of feels like Miami's on that. There's just not that much of a difference between those two leagues. Like if you're the 10th place team in the ACC, you can still make a run to Omaha, just like you can out of the SEC.
Love it. Hey, Kendall, you're muted if you're talking.
Sorry. No, I was going to say real quick, I think the big thing that kind of stood out to me about Miami, just watching them over the weekend as I was kind of going through all these different games, is, Will Smith, we knew so much about Brian Walters, but the job that, Smith did out of the bullpen, I mean, that was real stuff. And so when you look at Walters and you look at the stuff that Smith has, that's a really nasty 1-2 punch. I think the other thing that kind of stood out to me as a whole, and, you touched on Siskar and Hughes, but, allowing 8 runs and the 3 wins in that regional is really impressive. That puts you in a really good position to win games. So it'll be interesting to see if, Siskar and Hughes and company going against that Louisville lineup on the road. It'll be interesting to see if they can kind of keep them in check as well, like they did with Southern Miss in at least one of the 2 games in Hattiesburg over the weekend.
I was mostly interested to see how far down the list of Miami greats Aaron was going to go. I was waiting on like a Dennis Rabin.
Dennis Rabin was the next name. I was like, should I go Dennis Rabin
Mark
or is
dropped
that too
Charlton
far?
Jimerson on us?
Charles Johnson. Let's go.
Pat
Yeah,
Burrell.
yeah.
I was mostly just reading off
Alex
names from
Cora.
like,
How do we not have an Alex Cora? Come
I
on,
was just
Yeah.
I was just talking about the 06, 08 Miami teams, like that
Yeah.
era is where I was kind of
Mark
It's
I will
always
say
been
this.
anti-90s.
I will say this. Really happy for JT Arteaga. I mean, this is a
Yes.
guy that at the midseason point, obviously we know a lot of the things that JD has gone through, but this was a guy that at the midseason mark, if we're being very honest, I mean, I was getting calls at the midseason mark about, like, hey, if Miami's making a change, like who should they go after behind the scenes? And he knew going into the last half of the season that his job was potentially on the line. And to have that team ready down the stretch and to have that team ready the way they did in a regional is really impressive. So I think JD's one of the all-time great dudes. And so I'm really happy for that staff that they were able to finish really strong and, now being a super regional for the first time since 16.
Hey, and a couple of developments on those teams, like as you alluded to, Fitzy, Miami, that for 4 weeks, they were the best team on the planet Earth, right? Like they go 10-1 versus NC State, Georgia Tech, Duke, and Boston College. And then kind of faded again. And Derek Williams being healthy, he's the Wichita State transfer. Like that seemed like a difference maker. One thing, Coach Farron and I got to interview Dan McDonald this week, and he just talked about in the conference tournament, they just couldn't really get their pitching the way they wanted it. But they felt like Forbes, Bivens, and Eberle was going to be a good rotation. Now, Forbes, here's the question. Like Forbes going 6 innings, that felt like not real. Like he just hasn't done that this year. But anyway, I think one of these stories from this pod, and then we'll move on, is 4 seeds were such a huge factor in this round. And this pod in particular, I mean, Columbia, I thought Southern Miss looked great, except for Columbia dumped them in the losers bracket to start. Yeah. And then you're just screwed, right? Like you got to win 4 games in 3 days. And like, I'm sorry, that ain't, that's tough sledding. And then, as you guys mentioned, Wright State was incredible. What a story they were. Boston Smith, nuts how good he's been.
Runes, I'll say this too, not to get off on a overarching tangent about just overall college baseball, but I thought one of the things that stood out to me over the weekend, just from watching all the action around the country, is, we've talked over the last 2 years about NIL and how these different elements of college athletics now are going to create, a bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots. And I'll be honest with you, I saw a lot of 4 seeds over the weekend that didn't look like they were just out, like 100% outclassed by the number 1 seed. There were no regionals that I'm sure I'm missing some games somewhere, but for the most part, there were not regionals where it was like, man, this team, like all of the, like 2 of these 4 teams or 2 of the 3 teams don't even look like they belong on the same field as the number 1 seed. I did not see that anywhere, really.
And people, I'm sure you guys got this question on interviews, but people always ask, hey, who's your 4 seed this year? And I was just like, I ain't got one, man. I'm sorry. Like they all look like they're going to get murdered. Like I had no confidence in any of the 4 seeds, and man, I did
have a little bit of confidence in Murray State. Like I thought Murray State would be dangerous for Ole Miss. I will say that. I mean, I did not have Little Rock. Granted, LSU dominated Little Rock in the first game, but I did not have Little Rock making a run in that regional for sure.
Little Rock was a shocker, I think, to all of us that they actually. I mean, do I need to remind you guys they beat LSU. Yeah. We're talking about Louisiana State University. Yeah. In
tied
in
the 7th in the last game.
A game to win a regional, to force a game 7, like at Alex MFing Box Stadium. Like what? Like what?
I think they should officially change the name to Alex MFing Box Stadium.
I think they should. That was bonkers for a team that was, well below 500, barely got in the OVC tournament, lowest ranked, RPI team in the whole field. That was bonkers. Murray State, not bonkers. Like none of us picked them to win the regional, of course. But like, if you go back and listen, I'm sure we talk about them as one of the more dangerous 4 seeds, a team that was very much on the radar. But that's it. I think Kendall's right about the 4 seeds in general, holding their own fairly well. And I'm going to say one more thing before we move on. Shout out to our guy, Canes Cats Heat 305. We had a exchange way back in early in the season. He was giving us a hard time about, Miami's going to beat up UConn. And listen, they didn't. UConn won that series. But our guy, he gets a little bit of redemption here. Miami is here in a super regional. UConn didn't make the tournament. They should have. They didn't. So hats off to you, my friend. Enjoy your victory lap.
There we go. Rune, should we, since Fitzy was talking about Murray State and we were talking about Murray State, should we talk about Duke and Murray State?
Oh no, let me. I'm going to take us down the left side of the bracket because that's the Friday games, and then we'll do the right side.
But we do not have a time limit. But we do
slightly. One final thing on Little Rock, we can come back to it. But if Jay Johnson doesn't get at least one email that says, how did you let Little Rock beat you on Angel Cano? I'm going to be very disappointed. Now, I say that in jest because Angel Cano looks like an absolute SEC player. Like that dude, he looks like Albert Bell. I thought Albert Bell showed up in the wrong uniform. All that said.
By the way, did y'all see that the LSU student section, which is right behind right field, the center fielder made like multiple outrageous plays over the weekend. At the end of the game, they started chanting transfer portal at him.
It's amazing. Well done. Boys, so the next one on the Friday deal. So again, Friday, 12 noon Eastern, Arizona at UNC. 3 p.m. is Miami, Louisville, which we just talked about. 6 p.m. is going to be Florida State at Oregon State. Those are Eastern times. 9 p.m. is Coastal at Auburn. That's 9 Eastern. Who wants to take us to Corvallis? Who wants to kick that one off?
That's a good one.
Kendall?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk real quick about it. I think we learned a lot about Oregon State over the weekend. This was a weird team throughout the season. You know, I saw them in Round Rock earlier this year, and they looked incredible the first day, and their offense was stagnant the rest of the weekend. There's been times where that's kind of been who they are, but I thought, you know, when they lost that first game to St. Mary's, you're thinking like, okay, this is a team that it's hard to imagine them coming out of the losers bracket. But it was really hard to imagine them coming out of the losers bracket and playing that outrageously well. I want to say they outscored opposing teams. Was it 50-6? I think in the games
like
after
that.
losing the first one.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
like
insane. And so I just think when you look at Oregon State as a whole, you know, Ivar Arquette had a big weekend. Gavin Turley a big weekend. You know, we talked about it on the preview pod last week about, you know, can they get, you know, Trent Carraway going? Trent Carraway had a big weekend. So if Trent Carraway's sitting at the bottom of your lineup with that kind of talent and he's all of a sudden on a roll, watch out, dude. They're dangerous.
Yeah, and he's
Jump in
now,
there, boys.
Now I think he's up at the 5 hole. Like he might have started the regional in the 9 hole and he's red hot, and I think he's hitting like 5th now. You know, this is the guy we've been waiting to see. Doing damage for the fabulous Fit Dogs, I might add. They have home runs in 5 straight games, Beaver fans. Do I have that right?
He was the MVP of the regional. Carraway.
Yeah, he's hot. And you know, listen, they're scary right now once they're rolling. I think, you know, Florida State though is also very formidable. I mean, very scary, and this is such a good matchup. Gosh, I really I love this one. I'm jealous that Bradley's going out there. I thought about going out there, but we got 2 in our backyard, Joe and I. So we got to take the home games, you know, use resources responsibly. But this is such a good series. I mean, Florida State, I don't know. It feels like this team is the bullpen was a question mark for a while, but I kind of like the way it's come together. You know, it feels like it's been better of late here, and obviously, like we know they've got the firepower in the mound. It feels like Joey Vellini is back in form after kind of struggling in the second half. I feel like he has kind of figured it out. And you know, we know that they can score a lot of runs. That's something that they do pretty well. Their offense says. I mean, I don't know. I just think it's 2 teams that are very, very dangerous. I don't have a whole lot else to offer. Joe, what do you got?
Well, I was when we talk about this matchup with Florida State and Oregon State, I was actually an overarching thing with these 2 regionals is there are 2 teams involved that I was kind of disappointed in, to be honest with you. Like TCU just kind of wasn't competitive across their 2 games in the regional. I just pulled up the scores real quick. It was 13-1 loss to USC and a 7-2 loss to Oregon State. And look, this team that was in Omaha a couple years ago, so I don't want to be like unfair about it, but like that is disappointing for a team that we kind of thought might be a sneaky competitor alongside Oregon State in that regional to make a run. They just didn't happen. Now, Runes, I know you're really high on the young talent, and how could you not be? So perhaps brighter days coming, but I think especially considering there were some veteran pieces on that team, you kind of thought that maybe this would be a year where they could make more of a run, and they just didn't. The other is Northeastern. Now, they did win a game, but boy, they had to work hard to beat Bethune-Cookman.
Yeah, they did.
And you know, Bethune-Cookman, like, congrats to them. I didn't see every out of that game, but they seemed to also just be playing well, so that was part of the equation. But once again, it was a Northeastern team that you're really high on, and they go into the postseason, and it just doesn't look like the same team, really. And so they did get the win, so we'll give them that. But they're now 1-8 in these last 4 regional appearances, and so it's just disappointing that a team that I feel like, you know, we joke with Aaron about Northeastern all the time as kind of a bit, but the reality is, like, I think we all understand that this team's pretty good. Like, they've got real talent. Like, this is not just like a plucky, like, mid-major Cinderella story. Like, they're very talented, and they just get in regionals and then just don't perform.
And I'll say this. I mean, you know, the elimination game against Mississippi State was 3-2. I mean, they're, you know, like they started out. They got shellacked in the first game. They scraped out a win against Bethune-Cookman, and then they had a kind of coin toss game against a pretty good Mississippi State team. So yeah, it's not like they completely no-showed. There have been years where they've just got 0-2 and gotten run off the field.
That's fair. That's fair.
So I mean, you know, it's not what they wanted after a 49-win season. I mean, like they're not gonna be satisfied with a 1-2 in a regional. Hey, we got to win. Like it's nice they got that monkey off their back, but like they're not satisfied. You're right. It's still a disappointment. But they were competitive. Give them that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm
glad
holding more the close win against Bethune. I'm holding against them
Yeah.
more than I am giving them credit for the close loss against, you know what I mean? Like, it's how do you balance those things?
Well, the optics, I'm with you, Joe. Like it just all weekend and even in past regionals, Northeastern just looks like somebody put, cement in their shoes, like they don't look at like this athletic, dynamic team that we know they are in the regular season. It just looks laborious. And like, I'm hoping that them getting off the schneid, like loosens them up a little bit. We know they're going to be in future regionals. And they did pitch great, to Fitzy's point. So I'm with you. Like, I'm just super pleased they got that W. So they get that issue off their backs. And then, St. Mary's, as you mentioned, Kendall, that was another 4 seed that won opening day, like just outrageous. They weren't even the regular season champion in the WCC. That was San Diego, but good for Eric Valenzuela and those crew. Hey, one thing I want to say about the matchup, Oregon State's pitching is interesting because it's a reverse rotation. They never quite got Friday right. Like it was Keljo and then Segura piggybacking, and then they flipped it at the end. Dax Whitney's been awesome on Saturday. He's just like this really talented freshman with poise. He made every start. He didn't miss one start. That's so impressive for a freshman. It's real stuff. And the velocity is still there. Like we all saw it this weekend. I mean, it's a mid-90s fastball with a really legit breaking ball. And then their secret weapon is their Sunday guy. Ethan Kleinschmidt is this sneaky JUCO slippery lefty who's really good. He's been awesome. And I feel like, it almost means Florida State's winning game 1, and then it starts from there. We'll see. But like you said, Fitzy, I think it's as intriguing a matchup as we have in this super regional round.
You got to think that Segura is going to start game 1 again, right?
I would think
This
so.
weekend?
I don't think Keljo's starting anymore. I think Keljo has come in when you can win a game.
DeCreamer threw really well over the weekend too. I mean, 6 strikeouts
they're
and 5
bullpen pieces.
shutouts.
Yeah, to your point. I mean, they're bullpen pieces. I mean, DeCreamer. Well, I guess he could start also. DeCreamer rather. I mean, it's with him and Lake Palmer and they got and Keljo, of course. I mean, they got a bunch of guys that I think the bullpen, Kellen Oakes, the bullpen I feel like is kind of underrated. Power stuff, like a bunch of guys. Like that was a piece that maybe coming into the year I wasn't quite sold on, was the bullpen, and I actually really liked the bullpen. Just kind of like Florida State's bullpen we weren't sure about. Well, this weekend it was pretty good, but really they got length out of their starters. It kind of took strain off the bullpen. Like if you can get 7 innings from Arnold and 8 innings from Wes Mendez, you're asking a lot less of your bullpen. So it does help to get length. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I just feel like these are teams that both have plenty of firepower on the mound and in the lineup. They almost feel like, in some ways, mirror images of each other. Oregon State can short game you more. One thing that I'll throw out there before we move on from this is playing at home, obviously, is an advantage because of the crowd, but also I was talking with a coach about Oregon State today, and he's like, yeah, one thing that they do really well at home is they know their turf so well, and they can play that inside game and like drop a bunt on a dime. Like they just get it to stop, and it's just, they have such good feel for playing on that surface. And it is like an old school, in some ways, an old school Fullerton or Irvine team that can really hurt you with that aggressive, high powered inside game. And they can also drive the ball out of the park. So I think that's a neat dynamic there.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing I would mention too is, watching the Corvallis region over the weekend, that place kind of played a little bit like a launching pad. Typically the air is a little thicker there. It's a little cooler, so it doesn't play like that. But I mean, balls were flying out of there over the weekend. And with Florida State, you kind of wonder if that's a really good thing for a guy like Miles Bailey, who, what did he hit how far was his home run over the weekend, Runes? It was something outrageous.
He had an opposite field one too that you're like, I'm sorry, what?
God, he is massive.
He's David Ortiz for me. Like that's the physical presence and the field of hit. He's still improving. One thing I'll say, I think the park plays a lot different daytime versus nighttime. And these are, it's a 3 p.m. local time start and a 6 p.m. start. So we could.
Okay, so one day game, yeah.
Yeah, we could. Who knows how much of an impact that'll have, but it's not going to affect Miles Bailey regardless because he can hit the ball 700 feet. But the place I think does play more offensive in the day.
Yeah. I will say this is the super regional I'm looking forward to the most outside of Arkansas, Tennessee.
Yeah, that's a good one. By the way, Mark S is just firing. Like he's literally bringing fire in the chat.
Blair Barnes
isn't walking through that door for FSU. I mean,
Paul.
all hail Blair Barnes. Just that is so good. You also asked Mark asked what was Pat Casey's superpower, and I think it was just edge. Like his teams played like they weren't Oregon State. Like it was he could get a team to believe and compete. They were good at everything. Like they pitched, they hit, they did everything. But man, he could turn a team of regular, just good players into believers. That was really
Remember what was the drawing a blank now? Who was the number 2 starter? Oh, Bryce Fimmel. Remember when Bryce Fimmel had like a 1.84 ERA for that team, and like had the most like average stuff ever outside of the changeup?
Yeah, it was like an 86.
That was like Pat
like
Casey
86 to 88. Right-hander with a good changeup.
Yeah.
It's like dominant.
Jonah Nickerson. The boys. So let's go, Fitzy. I think this would probably be you. So North Carolina wins the Chapel Hill Regional. They did require a Game 7. Arizona won the Eugene Regional, which got off the rails from the jump. Take us there, Fitzy, to the Chapel Hill Super.
Yeah, this one's good. Coach Healy is going to be covering this one for us. We're going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to take the first ever Durham Super Regional. First time ever postseason baseball at Jack Coombs, by the way. I think that's neat. We'll get to that.
Bring your own flannels.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what that means, but I like it.
The hipster Super Regional.
Yeah. All right. Fine. This guy. Gavin Gallagher put on an absolute show once again. Second year in a row winning the Chapel Hill Regional MOP Award. Of course, we remember last year he had the walk-off grand slam to beat Long Island. This year, oh my gosh, where did he get like 700 or something in the regional? It was insane.
Bonkers.
Was it 13 for 18?
13 for 18.
I don't know. It was
ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous with a bunch of home runs. I popped in there on Monday for the clincher. And he hit a couple balls out of the yard, and it's like, okay, there he is, Mr. June, just doing what he does. They got, I thought they handled this regional really well, and Darren Vaught wrote about this for us on Monday on the site. They won the first 2 games. Everything was going according to script. You get, Knapp is Knapp in the first game. ACC Pitcher of the Year, Jake Knapp. That's going to be challenge number 1 for Arizona, is you got to compete with this big Clydesdale who's going to pitch into the 8th inning, and it's going to be 94, 96 and bumping 7 all the way through and establishing fastball and enough slider and changeup. But like he's a horse who just performs every single week. He's so consistent. So he did his thing, pitched into the 9th. They shut out Holy Cross the first game, and they come back the next day, and they jump Kyson Witherspoon, and they get a great DeCaro start. Jason DeCaro being back to form is huge for North Carolina right now. He looks like the guy that he was as a freshman, and the reason that we made him a first-team preseason All-American this year. We expected huge things. He didn't have a great year, but right now it seems like he's back, and it's just total for me. It's a total game changer. And then once they fell behind in that Sunday game, they kind of punted, because they're like, look, we're not going to burn we got these 2 bullets, these freshman arms, Ryan Lynch and Walker McDuffie. We're not going to burn them in a game we're losing. Because they know they can come back and start Lynch and get 4 or 5 innings out of him, which is exactly what happened on Monday. And then come in with McDuffie and just slam the door. And that's exactly what happened. And of course they also distanced, offensively, they just had enough firepower there to really pull away. The offense is so much better than I gave credit for the first half of the year, first 2/3 of the year. It's really come together. And they're hey, Kendall, you were right. You picked them as a national championship kind of team. And they're looking like that kind of team. It's not the most pitching depth. They had to not fall into the losers bracket, I thought, the first 2 days, and they didn't. They lost on Sunday, but they came back. I mean, that didn't tax their pitching depth enough, because I don't think they have a great pitching staff. I don't think it's a super deep pitching staff. But in a super regional, you're fine. You got plenty of arms, and they do everything else quite well. So someone else want to take the lead here on Arizona and Eugene?
Yeah, I was just actually writing out some notes on Arizona just because I saw them earlier this season. The one thing that really stands out to me, and I'll be curious to get Rune's take on Owen and Kramkowski here in a second, but just looking at Arizona as a whole, what Kevin Vance has been able to do with his pitching staff over the last few weeks is pretty incredible. In their last 7 games, guys, Arizona has given up 10 runs total. That's just incredibly impressive when you're thinking about the Big 12 tournament. You're thinking about a regional in Eugene. Their pitching has been phenomenal. And, Krimkowski had a stretch there against Utah and Houston where he gave up, I think it was 13 runs in maybe 9 innings. The last 2 starts, 1 run in 13 innings. So he went 13 innings, gave up 9 runs, then went 13 innings, has given up 1 run. So Krimkowski's been really good. Smith Bailey's been a kind of a consistent force for them all year long. When I saw them earlier this year, that was my favorite arm on that pitching staff. But you look at Casey Hintz on the back end of the bullpen, Tony Pluta, it's 2 different looks, but 2 really effective relievers. Arizona is really dangerous this weekend. And I was looking at the betting odds earlier today, and I think North Carolina and Arizona was like the 2nd highest betting odds in favor of North Carolina. That shocked me a little bit because I think Arizona is really dangerous this weekend.
Yeah. Agreed.
Arizona's got star position players like Mason White's on a crazy heater. He's got like 8 home runs in the last 2 weeks.
Aaron Walton.
Aaron Walton. Adonis Guzman has really emerged. Brendan Summerhill is healthy. And then, I think North Carolina's got stars on the mound. You were right, Kendall. Arizona's bullpen, it's very creative. Tony Pluta is a 5'9" guy that throws cutters, and Julian Tongini is got big stuff and can really spin it, and Hunter Alberini and Garrett Hicks and Casey Hintz's sidearm, like their bullpen is just a real headache. This is another one that it's just like the matchup is so delicious. I'm really curious to see North Carolina's pitching against Arizona's offense, because I think those are 2 really special groups that, I'll be curious to see who wins that matchup. Joe, do you want to take us to Coastal and Auburn?
Sure, I would love to, Runes. Some drama at the Conway Regional, but we'll stick to on-field.
What are you talking about?
We go to the Highway to Hoover podcast for Mark and I's take on it. How's that for a team?
The pressers were lit though.
They really were. So obviously there were a couple things here. One of the more shocking things, I'll say, it was like ECU just ran Florida off the field twice. And, it didn't end up being enough, but I thought that was impressive for a team that really has spent the entire season fighting to find themselves and figure out who they are. And I do think it, just before I move on to the Coastal piece of it, like I do think that does set the stage for like ECU could be pretty doggone good next year. It was a very young team this year. I did one of their ESPN Plus games earlier this season. They had like 4 freshmen in the starting lineup, and it's incredibly inexperienced. So I thought that was a nice maybe launching point for them to go into next season to play well in that regional. But Coastal ends up winning it ultimately without a ton of drama. Right. They just kind of took care of business, and that's who this Coastal team has been. Obviously the pitching really stands out because it's a pitching staff that if they traded places with just about any SEC starting rotation anyway, you probably wouldn't notice a lot of difference in terms of quality and stuff and physicality, even with guys like Morrison and Flukie. So that's, that I think that's a real game changer to how well that Coastal has pitched this year. But what stands out to me most, I was talking to a scout at the Sun Belt tournament who pointed this out to me, and I hadn't really noticed it, but this is why scouts are scouts and I'm not, is just, they were like, Coastal is the team that they don't let you take a breath at any point, because they make every routine play. They go first to third on every single. They go second to home on every single. They're looking for 2 out of the box on everything that's not hit directly at someone. They obviously have a total field general behind home plate. So it's like, that guy steals like 20 strikes a game. And so it just feels like you have to play your absolute best game to beat them. And that's frustrating because that might not actually be true, but it feels true because they're not making any mistakes. And sometimes it's good enough to win, sometimes it's not. And we'll see. Auburn's talented enough to beat them even if Coastal plays well. But that's, I think, part of what's made them so special is, yes, that the pitching being as good as it's been has been a total season-altering thing. But I think that the fact that they play so clean and they're so buttoned up, to use a term that Butch Thompson likes to use for teams like that, they're so buttoned up that it just makes it hard. Like you feel like you're playing against a team like robots almost, because they don't tend to make those kind of mistakes that lead to big innings or lead to deflating. They don't make deflating errors at the wrong time, that kind of that kind of stuff. And I think now I was in Auburn, but I'll let someone else kind of take this as a jumping off point. Like, I really do think there's a very real chance Coastal goes in there and we realize that those two teams aren't that far apart. Because I think their pitching Auburn hit well over the weekend, but their offense is not so overwhelming that Coastal's pitchers couldn't make that a real interesting weekend.
A couple of things, just to kind of sew up Coastal here, to button them up, if you will. First of all, I will say this: there was drama in the regional championship game. It was 1-0, scoreless into the 8th. I mean, it was a great baseball.
Let me ask you this though: did it feel like, because I obviously was just watching it through like squeeze play and stuff, it felt like the kind of game where yes, it was 0-0 late. Did it ever feel like Coastal was not winning that game?
There were, Riley Eichhoff had to walk the tightrope there in the middle innings, like fifth through 7th. It was like guys in scoring position, third base, second base. Like he had to make big pitches, and he did. And I thought that game was very much felt like it was hanging in the balance. And obviously you credit Bradley Zayak, the freshman for East Carolina. He pitched great, but Eichhoff was so impressive. And here's the thing: you talked about their pitching staff, the rotation, like being SEC caliber. Like I think almost most SEC rotations, not Arkansas, not LSU, probably not Tennessee. Most I think SEC teams would be happy to have this rotation.
Yeah, they would trade it straight up. Most of them
straight up, like Fluky 94, 97 with like big curveball slider. Like I think he had a change up too. Like it's 4-pitch guy, physical, who throws strikes. It's like high end stuff. Morrison like spins the hell out of it. 2 different breaking balls, and he's 6'8". He's a donkey. He's got great command. It's experience, pitchability. And Eichhoff, you bring him in here as this Sunday guy, and he's a sinker slider extraordinaire. Just pummels the strike zone and suffocates you with strikes. And if he gets in trouble, he can get double play ball because he's just a great like old school sinker slider guy. I love that, man. Big fan of that combination. And their bullpen's elite. Dominic Carbone's got the best stuff on the whole staff on the left side, and Ryan Lynch has got the best number on the whole staff. Like it's really, really, and they got depth behind that. Their pitching staff is real, and everything else you said is true. So I like their team a lot, and I am very excited about this matchup because it doesn't feel like they're built for that ballpark. They're not a home run hitting team, uncharacteristically for Coastal. They're not a home run hitting team, and they're going to a home run hitting park, but so is their own park, where they won plenty of games this year. So I am curious, though. You just saw Auburn this weekend. I know we'll let somebody else weigh in, but I'm curious, like, Auburn is just continue to surprise me all year long. The way that they've, with all that youth, the way that they've continued to just win, baby. It's really like all those young kids are obviously they're not freshmen anymore, right? That's what coaches always say, but those guys in the lineup are really good.
Yeah, there's the good kind of naivete about them, like those freshmen. Like they're just out there like, what is this? This is supposed to be difficult? Like what's the problem here? Now they know it's not that easy, but like that's kind of how they play. Like it feels very free and easy. And they're impressive. Like, Bub Terrell was up on the podium a couple times in post-game press conferences and just super mature guy, like you can see why it's translated so quickly for him. But yeah, I'm with you in that, like, you look at you look at Auburn, like unit by unit, and it doesn't blow you away, but it doesn't have to, right? But they're kind of getting by on, Sam Dutton's giving them some really good stuff. And then, maybe Chatterton pitches well one weekend and Andreas Alvarez pitches well another weekend. Cam Tilley is the guy in a given weekend. But that's also what kind of makes me nervous about them this weekend, is because it's such a small sample of a super regional that, if they put Cam Tilley out there and he pitches like he did last weekend against Central Connecticut, they're in trouble because he had all kinds of trouble with his command, and the stuff is good, but it doesn't really matter if you can't command it. And if that happens against Coastal, like they're not going to be able to recover the way they were against Central Connecticut.
I just think the blend for Auburn is so perfect. Like they've got 3 freshmen in their everyday lineup: Rembert, Terrell, and Freilich, and that feels uncomfortable. Except for those are 3 special talents, and you've got Ike Irish to cover up a lot of stuff, right? They're arguably the best hitter. Yeah. Same thing in the rotation. Chatterton, their Saturday guy, is a freshman. That feels uncomfortable. But then Samuel Dutton is this like, experienced. I know he hasn't pitched a bazillion innings, but like he's a veteran. you know what you're getting every time out. All that said, I'm with you guys. Like, I think if I'm a Coastal fan, this is a great draw. Like, I'm very comfortable going to play Auburn. They could beat you, but it's not. You're not. To your point, Joe, you're not comparing the two rosters and saying we got no chance. Like, it feels like whoever plays better will win this super regional. Fitzy, go ahead, Kendall.
Well, I was just going to say, like, you look over the weekend, I can't even remember what game it was now. I watched so many games, but, there's one game that was really close, and all of a sudden Ike Irish, I want to say you either hit a grand slam or a 3-run home run. What I kind of wonder is, if you're Kevin Schnall, do you just go into the weekend and say, I'm going to make someone else not named Ike Irish beat me?
That's just tough with the way, the freshmen were really outside of Ike. The freshmen were honestly maybe their 3 best hitters over the weekend in the regional. Certainly Bub Terrell. I mean, Bub Terrell was like 8 for 11 or something. And then Cooper McMurray still exists, right? Like that's a guy. Like, I was looking through the game notes, and like Cooper McMurray is up there with like some like big time names in both Auburn and SEC history in terms of power hitting. And it's just like, maybe it's just because he's always been teammates with Ike Irish. It feels like we just don't acknowledge that fact that he's been really productive for 3 straight years. And oh, by the way, like, plays a pretty slick first base these days. Like, he's gotten better over there. He's also lost a bunch of weight. He's more athletic. So, but anyway, I kind of agree with you, Kendall. Like, I do think you have to go into that weekend being extra careful with Ike Irish, because all throughout SEC play, he was just incredible. But at the same time, I do think their depth has emerged in the lineup to the point where that's tricky, because you seems like you're kind of asking to get beat by Cooper McMurray or Chase Freilich or what have you.
Hey, let's wrap that side of the bracket there. One thing while we're talking about Auburn, Stetson was great. Good for Steve Trumper and the Hatters. They were awesome. The only thing that was stunk about Stetson was Matt Schick's puns around the Hatters were just god awful. Matt Schick, if you're listening,
what was the worst one?
I mean, they were so. I like blocked them out.
Schick, if you're listening, grow up.
So good. Fitzy, one other thing I'll share with you is the team that shut down North Carolina the most in Chapel Hill was the pride of Worcester County, the Holy Cross Crusaders. Many are saying it's harder to win the Patriot League than it is to win a regional. Many are saying.
Yep, I've heard
that's
that.
true.
I've heard that before.
So
they pitched well in both their line. I know they went 0-2, but they showed well on the mound.
They did your county proud.
Go Staters.
While we're on the topic, check out my piece on D1 Baseball. It's on Central Connecticut State. I wrote about them coming out of the weekend. They played pretty well in that opener against Auburn. All the other coaches were super complimentary of them, because like, it is a style of baseball you do not see. Like, Aiden Redahan is the guy who's leading the country in hitting, and that is a true, like, let's get 6 inches up the knob of the bat and just flick this thing the other way. Like,
Nice.
it is truly something you don't see in college baseball. So they were a lot of fun. And I just wrote about a lot of different stuff with them after the weekend, because I was pretty just impressed with Charlie Hickey, their coach, and their players. And they were just a lot of fun to cover.
I love it. Kendall, let's go to the right side of the bracket. I'm going to have you take UTSA won the Austin Regional. UCLA won the Hollywood Regional, the Los Angeles Regional, which was poorly named. It's got to be the Hollywood Regional. Go ahead, Kendall. Tee us up there.
I will talk about the pride of the state of Texas, UTSA. What an impressive club, man. Pat Hallmark, we've all known him forever. Joe, being a lifelong kind of Rice fan behind the scenes, knows what Hallmark's all about. And that was just a really just awesome club over the weekend. I thought they played outstanding defense. Mason, Lytle is a guy that, we've written about him before. I want to say Fitt saw him against ECU. He's an awesome hitter, 9 home runs, 66 RBIs, but his defense over the weekend was incredible. James Tausig, just a big bopper in that lineup, but, just a really good offensive approach. The thing I really liked about them was just their depth from an offensive standpoint. One thing that Pat brought up in postgame was, they lost Rigor Riojas and they lost Matt King, but what they did when those guys left is they kind of opened their eyes to the portal a little bit more. They went and got Norris McClure from a D2 school in Alabama and Spring Hill College. Norris McClure, I think every hit I logged over the weekend in Austin had an exit velocity of like 103 to like 110. Like, he was hitting everything on the barrel. So McClure was really impressive over the weekend. And then, you look up and down their lineup, and it's just like, Caden Miller had some big hits. The Hodge brothers, Ty Hodge being an A&M kickback, had a really big weekend against the Longhorns. And so they've got depth offensively. I do think there's enough there, from a pitching standpoint. Robert Orlowski out of the back end of the bullpen was up to 96. Zach Rice was certainly really good over the weekend, again, up to 95, 96. And then Braylon Owens, you talk about a really likable dude, awesome personality, awesome perspective. And by the way, he's a really good reliever. So in essence, UTSA checked every box over the weekend. And the other thing I will say about them, and keep an eye on this weekend in Los Angeles, Hollywood. And I know John Savage is going to preach this to his club, is they remind me so much in some ways of that 2014 Louisiana team. They will do things differently. They will hit and run in situations that maybe you wouldn't expect them to hit and run. They may steal in situations that you're like, wait, why in the hell are they trying to steal? And the thing I love most over the weekend against Dylan Volantis, and I love this answer, against Dylan Volantis, James Towson comes up to the plate. He's 6'4", 235. There's a guy on second base, and all of a sudden he just drops down a bunt, gets on base, and the guy actually came around to score. And in the post game, we're asking him, like, dude, why are you bunting against Dylan Volantis? He goes, well, I knew that lefties were hitting like 130 against him. And like I was doing the percentage of me getting on base via a hit or just bunting when they're not expecting it is a lot better if I bunt. So I just decided to bunt. So what I'm saying is they will do a lot of different things that isn't in the scouting report.
Yeah.
Love it.
Go
ahead,
One
Fitzy.
thing I'll say is the striking to me is these pitching staffs are different because UTSA really has the advantage in the rotation. Like they've got three guys who are just horses who started every weekend for them. The same three guys, which I think Pat Hallmark told me they'd never had that before, even in his coaching career anywhere else. Yeah. Rice, except maybe like since the Rice days of whatever Neiman, Umber and Towns, I don't know, but. With Zach Royce, who's got real stuff, and you saw Braylon Owens out of the bullpen, Kendall, but he started all year long for him, and they needed him to finish the game, so he did. But like that guy's a horse, he's a tank, and then Connor Miles. So like it's three guys who are going to give you length, and maybe they don't have as much depth in the bullpen. Whereas UCLA, they're not going to get a lot of length out of their rotation most of the time. Yeah. But they mix and match and they shorten the game in the bullpen. And they feel really good about those pieces. And it's more of like a Duke style pitching staff where it's, it's different looks and, run a guy out there until he's not effective. Then you go to somebody else and you match up. And Savage is not like a classic Savage pitching staff. Honestly, like it feels like UTSA feels like more of a classic John Savage staff. Like Savage likes his horses who go deep, and then you get your seventh inning guy, your eighth inning guy, your ninth inning guy. Like that's traditionally how he would run a staff. And this team's not like that. They just are like it's more kitchen sink, And I think that's cool at this stage, in John Savage's career that he can adapt like that and win, as much as they have with a much different style pitching staff.
Well, the other thing I'll say about UTSA, and I'll let somebody touch on UCLA again, but the one thing I will say about them is before, anybody says it this weekend, that is not a remotely a Cinderella kind of team. Like they were clearly better than Texas over the weekend. I'm not saying they played twice, 15 weekends in a row that they would win 12 of them. But for that weekend, it wasn't like Texas was awful. UTSA was just much better. And so I think this is a team that if they won the Super Regional and they get to Omaha, like they actually match up pretty well in Omaha. Like they've got an elite outfield defense, which is certainly important in Omaha. So again, they've got to get through UCLA, but if they get to Omaha, they're dangerous there, man. I
can't wait until they run that championship parade right out in front of the Alamo, right past the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center.
Oh, I didn't think. You know what? I might just root for them the rest of the way. There's nothing more Texas than having a championship parade in front of the Alamo.
They're the only Texas team left. You have to root for them. The only Texas team left in the field.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Fitzy's been saving that dig, and gave him great joy to deploy
I will say this. The OG is looking down and very proud of Pat Hallmark.
Yes.
No doubt.
It's an outrage that there are more Texas teams left than Massachusetts teams, but I'll give Kendall that. He's got me there.
Yes. Very big of you. Roman Martin for UCLA. Keep an eye on him.
Yeah.
Rock Chalowski is the famous guy. Mulavai Lavu is another really important hitter for them. But Roman Martin was a star in recruiting. Like, this is a 6'2", 200-pound, really a high school shortstop. He's playing third for them. He had 6 hits and a big grand slam. And UCLA is very young. It's a ton of sophomores, but two great stories to your point, Kendall.
Yeah, one more arm for UCLA that I'll point out, just watching one of their games late at night the other day, is really impressive. Cal Randall. I liked his confidence on the mound. He was ready for the moment, and I want to say he was up to like 97, 98 out of the bullpen. It was electric stuff for UCLA. So keep an eye on Cal Randall against that UTSA lineup this weekend. He really stood out.
We wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't mention the name Chalowski. Probably should mention that name. He's
number one in our hearts, but not a finalist.
He's a guy that you should know
somehow.
My old friend Joe Lacates calls this the Chalowski snub revenge series incoming. Maybe Joe. He's the best player in the country from my mind.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say that. Like, I voted for him as a finalist for the Golden Spikes, did not get that cut, but I think he's the best player in the country. He does everything. He is the heart and soul of this super regional team. He hits for power. He runs. He plays elite defense. He has leadership. He controls the strike zone. Like, he does everything. He's awesome. And also, don't forget about my guy Dean West. Love Dean West, top of the lineup. Just discipline. A
great all-fit candidate
for sure. He's a lock. Twice as many. He's short. He's got twice as many walks as strikeouts. Fun player.
Hey, Joe, since you are Valley Joe, you're known as Valley Joe in some circles. Murray State,
yes, thank you.
The Racers won Oxford, and then Duke won the Athens Regional. Could you get us started there?
I would love to, Runes. Thank you for this opportunity. They did, like, the thing about Murray State, we kind of all saw that, hey, this was going to be tricky, right? I mean, when Ole Miss announced Riley Maddox instead of Hunter Elliott in game 1 of that regional, I kind of went, just like, no offense to Riley Maddox, but I just felt like Ole Miss you got to put your dude out there against those guys because they can really hit. And we saw what happened, and they started hitting and didn't stop hitting at any point. Like, even in the game they got blown out, they still scored 8 runs. So it's not like that had ever really stopped. They just, didn't pitch well in that particular game. So, and it's real. Like, I did my coach's call with the anonymous coach feedback for Murray State today that we do for our super regional previews. And the coach I talked to was like, look, it's guys that they've done a really good job finding guys who are just really, really talented from, Dustin Mercer, I think, started his career at Virginia Tech, right? Like, and that's not necessarily, Murray State is not the place you'd think would collect Virginia Tech transfers, right? That's not necessarily in the same little area there. But anyway, moral of the story is they're going to go in as the underdog in this thing, but you can count on a couple of things that I think give them at least a puncher's chance in this super regional. They never strike out at the plate. Like, they just don't strike out. And that always gives them a chance. And then second of all is that you just know that they're going to be able to get out of bed and they're just going to hit line drives. Like, not everybody's going to be hot at the same time, but they are going to barrel some balls. It's going to come down to, for me, are Silva and Shuddy going to be fresh enough to give them what they're going to need to give them? Because they've got those two guys. They've got Kellum in the bullpen. They've got the lefty whose name escapes me out of the bullpen, Zinko. And those are kind of the guys they want to lean on. It's a little like UTSA in that way. UTSA has a couple more, but they have a pretty small little core of guys they want to try to get the bulk of the outs with. And I just wonder if, Shuddy throwing 100 and let's just call it 140 some odd pitches over the weekend and Silva over 100 across 2 outings. Like, is that going to be a hindrance to them this weekend? And the other piece of it is, for if you're Ole Miss, like, not really sure how I think they overachieved a little bit in getting to a host spot, did Ole Miss. So on one hand, it's like, I think they came together as a team in the regular season. I think it was better than I thought it would be on paper. I thought, okay, regional team. Yeah. But to host, I think was really, really impressive. I think they got 110% out of their roster this season. I thought they did a really good job there, but it's yet another, like, this Ole Miss thing of in Swayze for whatever reason, like they just kind of have a hard time getting out of postseason games in Swayze. And this one went a little different than some of the others went. But still, a home regional loss is always a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, what's really weird, I thought, just about Ole Miss this weekend is I thought they actually showed us a lot by being down 12-3 and storming back to make that game 12-11. Like when they did that, I was thinking like, okay, they came back from that deficit. Like they're totally going to win this game. So for Murray State, those final 2 innings to do what they did against Ole Miss, I thought was really impressive.
Well, and I would say, I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of the things I found impressive about Murray this week. Because the first game was a little like that too. They won the first game 9-6 against Ole Miss, and it was like they were up 5-0, and then Ole Miss tied it or went ahead, and then Murray just kept punching back. Now the last game was a little different because they were just hanging on for dear life. But for Kellum, their closer, to come back out and go 1-2-3 in the ninth after giving up 2 innings of laser show, like was pretty impressive stuff. Because I have to admit, watching from my hotel room, I just thought there was no way they were winning that game when Ole Miss started to pour it on.
Our guy Mark S in the comments asked Murray State batting approach comp 2012 Arizona, which it also reminds me of his 2016 Arizona, where Jay Johnson used to say a ball or a double, right? It's either a ball or it's a double. This team doesn't strike out.
Alex Mejia. Who were the other guys on that team?
Rob
Ref Snyder?
Ref Snyder. Yeah, that was the 2012 team. But yeah, the
2016. Yeah, Bobby Dahlbeck
team was the that team with Arizona was the next generation of guys. But it was like a ball or a double, right? And that's Murray State. It's like they don't strike out a lot, or there's a ton of doubles. Like Jonathan Hogart, 26 doubles. I mean, it's I think Kendall invoked the name Jason Krizan from Dallas Baptist earlier. I don't know if that was on the show or before the show, but I mean, that's like Krizan-esque numbers. Like it's he's also got 19 home runs. Like it's crazy how good a year. We're talking about Dustin Mercer because he's hot, but Hogarth's had a huge year for him. So anyway, they're good, man. And I'm excited to watch this weekend. Dan Skirka seems like he's got great personality. Fun matchup against a Duke team that can miss bats. I mean, this team, Murray State, doesn't strike out a lot offensively. Duke can miss bats with their, again, it's like a UCLA staff where they're going to mix and match. I mean, Owen Prost gave him some length this weekend. The lefty who has kind of become their Friday guy. And Kyle Johnson actually gave them 5 innings, which, I mean, that's like, again, credit this coaching staff. Like, hey, kind of playing a hunch almost. Like he had a good inter squad, so let's start him in the second game of a regional. Like, I mean, it's just these guys, they see something and they run with it. It's really cool. He is obviously really talented. He was almost, I don't think he was a preseason All-American, but he was very much in the conversation for that as a two-way player. Really talented sophomore left-hander who showed it this weekend when, in a big spot. And I mean, then you got so many lefties on this staff, with Mark, I mean, Joe, I don't know if you have a sense for how left-handed Murray State's offense is. I probably should have studied this already, but, Duke has so many lefties. Like they're really tough against teams that have a lot of left-hand. And Georgia was, for that reason, a team that their splits are way worse against lefties and righties. Not an ideal matchup for Duke. So they went Kyle Johnson, Mark Hindy, James Talon. That's tough. And Talon, especially right now, is freaking electric. He's so good right now.
I thought these two regionals were as well played, like as compelling as any. Somebody had to go 0-2 in Oxford, and it was Western Kentucky. But I didn't think Western Kentucky looked the part of like never been there. Somebody had to lose 2 games. I thought they looked good, and Georgia Tech was competitive. It was so. And you mentioned, Kendall, the 12-11 game. Like, that was just bonkers. What an all-time great regional game. And then same thing in Athens, Oklahoma State being down. The game with Georgia was incredibly chippy. And then Colin Ritchie steals a home run. He went off all weekend. He hits the big home run. Brock Thompson, he hits the opposite field home run to win it. Even though Oklahoma State, I'm sure, is crushed to lose another regional, I think as they get away from this, Josh Holiday and that staff will be able to take great satisfaction and joy from the Georgia win. That was not an easy win against a very Georgia was not a fluky top 8 national seed. That's a really talented team, really, really talented. So, but again, like Duke, you may have just said this, Fitzy, but 4th regional they've won in 7 years. They've never been at home. Just bonkers. Yeah. Like they've won 4 road regionals in 7 years. Yeah.
will.
Incredible.
Yeah, I will say this about Duke real quick, and Fitzy kind of been around that team a little bit, so he has a pretty good vibe on just kind of their clubhouse. But I do think if you're Chris Pollard, there is a challenge this weekend with this team, and that's that, you can finally smell a trip to Omaha. You're hosting a team that was a 4 seed that won a regional. It's not like you have Texas coming to town. You have a team that literally everyone thinks you should beat, and everyone's picking you to beat them. So I think there is a challenge in not kind of getting ahead of yourself a little bit and thinking that, we might have the easy path. I know they're not going to say that in a press conference, but like deep down, is there that battle there mentally that this is a little easier than maybe another pathway?
It's interesting. You make an interesting point because in part, yes, like a program that hadn't been there since 1961, that's knocked on the door 3 times previously in the last 7 years, that has this great opportunity. You're at home finally for the first time, but there's also this distraction that comes with being at home unexpectedly for the first time ever, in the postseason. I mean, that's wild. You think about the history of this program, their first time ever hosting postseason baseball. We've seen first time hosts in regionals just lay a complete egg. Now I think hosting a super is a little easier than hosting a regional just logistically. But still, like it's you're hosting for the first time. Like you'd think, yes, it's an advantage, but also it's, it can be a little complicated. It's and the other teams coming in here with like house money. We just won a regional as a 4 seed. We know we're good. We just beat Ole Miss, but also we've had a great year. We know we're a good team. Nobody's expecting us to win. Like that's a dangerous combination. So, I mean, look, I'm going to pick Duke. I think it's their time. They've been close. They're so well coached. They're so disciplined. I have so much belief in Chris Pollard and his staff to have his team ready to play. But it does also feel like it sets off some sirens about like trap potential here, and also just not only just trap potential, but the opponent is good. Murray State's good. That's it.
Hey, and also before we go to the final 2 pods, 2 storylines to watch. AJ Gracia will not play in game 1 of the Super Regional because he's suspended because of the stupid, celebratory. Again, I'm going to prevent myself from going down a tangent, but I will say this: you can't wear a construction hat 2 feet onto the field, but you can scream effing bloody murder into the opponent's dugout and play on. Our rules are so twisted up there.
And while we're on this, has anybody ever watched like an NCAA tournament softball game? Like it makes what AJ was doing look like child's play in terms of the props and things like that.
The other issue, guys, is Ben Miller. We don't know if he's playing, or unless you guys know something that I don't, did not play in the regional final. To me, that's Duke's 2 best hitters. Wallace Clark was brilliant in the regional, but Gracia and Miller are their 2 best hitters.
Right.
That we don't know what. So
although Sam Harris is hot too, he's really come on late. Like Bradley and I both thought he would heading into the season. Better late than never. He's kind of like their Trent Caraway. He's like the guy at the very end of the year who's like living up to his talent. Real quick on the Gracia thing. I mean, it's just the most absolutely absurd thing because again, it's not like there was no intention to show anybody up. I don't even think he was wearing the helmet. He just happened to still have it in his hand. He happened to I don't know, 2 steps out of the dugout to give a guy a high five. He's not trying to show anybody up. He's not being this swaggering jackass. He just forgot to put the damn helmet down and he took 2 steps. I mean, are you kidding me? Can we show a little bit of common sense? Umpires, I understand the rule, that's his own thing. The rule is the rule, but can we show just a little bit of discretion, a little bit of common sense? Please, can we please do this?
I would like to focus mostly on how Aaron almost called Sam Harris Sam Horn. It sounded like, and that would be that was about to be quite a pull there. Big Sam Horn.
A pull. That is a great pull. As we go to the final 2 spots, I want to say thanks again to our sponsors. You'll see a lot of us as we head deep into the postseason. That would be Soldier Sports. That would be Academy Sports and Outdoors, and that would be Tecovas Boots. I also want to say some of you asked for predictions in the comments. Those will be out on social media. The gang will make predictions. The Fabulous Rune Dogs we will bow out because we stink. We've been relegated. We're going to have to play in the championship next year, and If we win the championship, we'll be back making predictions next year.
Enjoy your matches with Plymouth
Runes?
Argyle, Runes.
We're playing Sheffield Wednesday on Saturday.
I was going to say, since we'll mention this again next week, but once again in Omaha starting next Friday, will be Soldier Sports will be set up there. Tecovas will have a booth there. We'll be doing some stuff with our friends at Wilson. We renewed that partnership, so we'll be at the Wilson House yet again. And so a lot more details on that, but a lot of sponsors, which is a really good thing when you travel as much as our staff does.
The game is growing, and the social media reaction or interaction for Squeeze Play was like, it just tells you that the game is growing like crazy.
Yeah.
Which is so
hey,
fun.
one thing I was going to mention.
Go ahead.
Well, no, one thing I was actually going to mention.
Piece.
Well, while we're in the middle of this, Aaron, can you kind of go through the list of where everybody's going to be this weekend?
I will, but I first want to just say, look at Thirsty Kendall just begging for compliments for like selling all these ads to pay for us to travel.
Oh, I am actually not begging for anything.
Fishing, Thirsty Kendall fishing. Hey, Kendall,
I'm not fishing.
Kendall, thank you for being a great sales guy.
Yes.
I'm busting Kendall.
I was about to say, that's really not what I'm trying to do here.
I know. It's certainly not, but we do appreciate all of our sponsors. And Kendall, our businessman. Thank you, Kendall, for selling all of these.
Hey, you're welcome.
You're good.
You're proud new capitalist.
Our staff is going to be all over the place. God, I've got us off the rails there. Staff's going to be all over the place, guys. We've got, let's see, Louisville is going to be shotgun sprattling. Corvallis is Bradley Smart. We've got Chapel Hill, our man, Coach Healy. We've got Auburn. Mark Etheridge will be there. We've got LA, of course, Stitchhead, Eric Sorensen. I will be at Duke for the first ever Durham Super Regional. Baton Rouge, Walter Villa will be there. His second week down in the Deep South. And Fayetteville will be Patrick Ebert. Very excited to make that trip. So all 8 Super Regionals, we will have him in on the scene. Very excited about that. Kendall does pay the bills, Mark. Yes, you're right. Kendall is the guy.
Yes, he does. No question. Joe, I just want to mention that many are saying Dan Skirka is the Kurt Reed of the coaches in the Super Regional round.
I'd say so. He's going to have a bathroom named after him in no time.
No time. Would you let us know about LSU, who won the Baton Rouge Regional, Joe?
Yeah, I'm going to start in the obvious place, and that's that, no, I don't know how it was that Little Rock nearly eliminated LSU, but it was kind of a fun subplot. I mean, look, I have a lot of respect for Chris Curry and what they've kind of done there, and I think they're in a good spot now being in the OVC. It feels like they've been able to kind of, like they've been able to get something going there, but there was no indication by the stats, the record, the results that suggested they should put up the kind of resistance they did. But they blew out more or less LSU in the first regional final game, like ended up not being all that competitive. And then it was a 1-run ball game in the 8th inning in the Monday game, something like that. I mean, it's just incredible stuff there. But I think kudos to LSU for getting out of that. And I think there's some element of maybe a near-death experience might end up actually being a good thing here, obviously, because if they let West Virginia hang around the same way, they'll probably take care of business in a way that Little Rock just wasn't quite good enough to do. But LSU is built for this first Super Regional with Anderson and Irons in 1-2. If they pitch up to their level of ability, that's all they're going to need. You don't need to do anything beyond that. And so that's going to be the big challenge for West Virginia is can you just generate enough offense? And, the regional win in such a way that LSU would never felt like they were, as much as they got pushed by Little Rock, it was kind of fascinating to me. Little Rock, by the last couple of games, it was fascinating to me that they just dispatched DBU so easily. Like they didn't have trouble with the team that we thought theoretically could give them trouble. And then they had trouble on the back end. And I think it goes to show, though, if West Virginia can just do something in this Super Regional to win one of the games with Anderson and Ianson on the mound, and that's easier said than done, obviously, that they can be in Game 3. Because, when you get to Game 3 with LSU, much like with Tennessee, right, once they get past Doyle and Phillips, like you can get some things done against their pitching staff on day 3, but getting to day 3 is going to be the hard part against LSU.
Yep. Anybody want to do West Virginia? I'm happy to help with West Virginia if we need to. I've seen them.
I will
Go
say
ahead.
this real quick. I didn't watch a lot of them over the weekend just because I was watching the squeeze play and I was hopping around everywhere. But I did see them earlier this season. And, at the time I did write an article that they look like a title contender. When I saw them against Houston, I loved their key pieces. I thought offensively there's enough there. I like some of the older pieces they have in their lineup. Grant Hussey's one of those older guys. On the mound, I loved the confidence that Chase Meyer had at Clemson. I know his outing didn't end great. I think if I'm not mistaken, he was dominant at the beginning of his outing, and then things kind of fell apart for him a little bit. But he's a confident presence in the back of that bullpen. He's got elite stuff, and so I actually really like the construction of West Virginia's offensive lineup. And they've got enough arms. Jace Reinhardt's another guy that's they can go out there and give them a good outing. And so Steve Sabins has done a really good job with that club.
Yep. I would say, Griffin Kern, their ace, is a Division II transfer. And you talk to Steve Sabins about him. He just says, look, the kid's thrown 1 million college baseball games. Like, it's not amazing stuff, but it's a little bit hotter than you think. It's 90-92. But the most important thing is, like, he's seen everything that you're going to see in a college baseball game, and he just pitches through it. And, I know it's a little cliche, but that is really the essence of their team. There's just a toughness and a play-onness. It's a little bit of what Ole Miss had, that they just don't get worn out by their own mistakes. I mean, they made 5 errors in a regional final and won anyway. And I think that regional just became such a food fight that actually benefited them very much. Like basically Kentucky went into Clemson, turned all the cafeteria tables upside down, and West Virginia was like, yeah, this is our kind of party. Let's go. And, Kentucky was probably just not quite good enough, but they made a mess of it. And, one cool thing for West Virginia, Brody Kresser was having an incredible year. And then I think he got hit in the face with a pitch, about a quarter of the way into the season. And just never got back on track, which is understandable, but he kept playing, and he went off this weekend, and he was batting 8th or 9th. And Armani Guzman, their sophomore third baseman, which hadn't, he had to kind of fight his way in there. He also went off. So they've got depth. I do think LSU, I think this is the super regional. That's the biggest mismatch, but LSU doesn't really blow people out. And so if you let West Virginia stay close, like one, bloop and a blast kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I will say this too. By the way, I bet Carson Estridge. I don't know why I said Jace Reinhardt. Carson Estridge was the arm I was talking about. I knew I'd messed that up as soon as I said it. Real quick on LSU, really impressed with Casey Evans over the weekend. Some people are going to go, oh, well, he's facing Little Rock. But, with that game tied there in the middle innings, it would be easy for a freshman that's never been in that situation in the box. You could literally hear through Ben and Ben, talking on the mic, you could literally hear the tension in the crowd. And so for a freshman to go out there and have that kind of stuff, the splitter was really good for him. But to have that kind of stuff and that poise and that confidence, I thought that was incredibly impressive. When you combine that kind of start that he had, or that kind of relief appearance that he had with Ianson and Cade Anderson, no disrespect to WVU, but I think that the hardest part is kind of behind LSU at this point.
One thing I'm looking for in this super regional is that West Virginia doesn't really give up the home run. Griffin Kern can get got a little bit for the extra base hits, but not a staff that gives up a ton of home runs. And I say that not because LSU is super dependent on the home run. Actually, on the contrary, their offense, outside of Jared Jones in particular, sometimes lacks for that. But if games get tight, I think it is kind of the SEC teams can sometimes fall in the habit of just trying to swing their way out of it and just mash. And I think we even saw that over the weekend, where how did LSU kind of pull away from Little Rock? Home runs by Luis Hernandez and Jared Jones. And it worked in that situation. Yeah. But if pitching staff like West Virginia that limits the home run a little bit, is that going to be as effective? Just trying to swing your shoot a game-changing home run.
Yeah, and Ethan Fry, by the way, was awesome over the weekend as well.
Fry's another one, yeah.
I mean, listen, I picked LSU to win it all. I think I also picked Arkansas to win it all on a different show, so I don't know how much credibility I have. Those are my two favorite.
Eventually you'll get it right.
Eventually I'll probably just keep throwing darts. So I like LSU in this series, but I'm just going to say this West Virginia team, I think Walt wrote in his preview today that it's not like they don't match LSU star power. but like they just for some reason they and it's almost damning with faint praise. Like I was like, oh come on, they got stars. I looked at it as like, yeah, they do. They have good players. They don't have the superstars, right? They don't have any superstar that compared with LSU superstars, but they're just the pieces fit together so well, and they just win. I mean, Logan Salve is a really good player, and Kyle West has had a lot of big hits, and Sam White's had a lot of big hits, and Gavin Kelly will be a star. He's a freshman now with star tools. Like they have a lot of good, Skylar King is an athlete. They got good players, and Griffin Kern, as you talked about already, like really just competitive winner. Like love the guy. But it's like they're not going to out talent LSU. They just got to, but they just find ways to win ugly, and the fact that they were able to do it this weekend after kind of just really stumbling down the stretch, they turned it around and they figured out a way to win a very, I think, challenging regional. I mean, Kentucky, obviously like played pretty well. They gave them a hard time, and Clemson is Clemson. Like to go in there and win that thing when you had been struggling down the stretch was pretty loud. So I like LSU, but I think that you got to take West Virginia seriously. And West Virginia played well last year in Chapel Hill. I mean, they gave them a run down there too. So this is their second straight super regional. That counts for something too.
West Virginia, to your point, Fitzy, they did go 37-5 to start the year, and they won the Big 12. And like, I don't care who you're playing or what the schedule is. That's hard to do. The Clemson, Clemson we won't talk about tonight. That'll be a story for the offseason. Like they have really figured out how to maximize what you get out of a roster. Now the challenge for Eric Bakich and his staff is how do they get their roster from top 16 talent to top 8 talent? Like we know that this is an elite coaching staff. Now they've got to just acquire better players. That's probably sounds really rude to say it that way, but I think that's more of an off-season topic. Joe, I just want to let you know that many are saying that Chris Curry is the Robert Redford of college baseball.
It's 100% true. A handsome devil, that guy.
Yeah. See, I'm going to have you start us. You're going to get an option here. So Tennessee won the Knoxville Regional. Cincinnati was viable. Wake Forest pushed Tennessee to a Game 7. That was really interesting. And then Arkansas won the Fayetteville Regional fairly easily. And, North Dakota State, I thought, showed great. They were another 4 seed that won a game. Creighton was awesome. They really showed great in Ed Service's final foray as a Division I coach. So, Fitzy, the choice is yours.
Choice is mine. I'm going to start with the Vols. I mean, I just, boy, I'll tell you what, when they can bring Liam Doyle back like that and just completely shove there to finish out a Game 7 or regional, that's a real weapon. Obviously, that guy in Phillips is so formidable at the top, and it feels to me like they're playing more like they were in the first half of the season when they felt like the best team in the country. I mean, at the midway point, they were, I don't know if they were still undefeated or not, but they were very close to it, right? I mean, they seemed like the best team in the country at that point. And then they went through that kind of rough patch in the second half, but they still didn't get swept at any point. And you look at their overall record, it's like, oh, this team lost those 4 straight home series, whatever. And you look up, they're still 46-17. I mean, like their floor is just so damn high. That's the thing. It's like their ceiling is high. We all know that, but so is their floor. Yeah. Like that's just, I don't know, man. They got pushed by Wake Forest, but it kind of felt like inevitable that they were going to find a way to come back and kind of blitz Wake on Monday. Wake threw their punch, and then they threw their punch again early on Monday in that game. But Tennessee just kind of felt like it was only a matter of time before they distanced themselves, and that's what they did. There's just so much firepower in that lineup, and of course, I mean, Doyle was a huge difference at the back. So I thought it was a good regional, but I just think the best team clearly won it. And this matchup is so juicy, guys. I mean, it's 2 super, super talented teams. Like for my money, it's LSU, Tennessee, and Arkansas in some order are the 3 most talented teams. And we've got 2 of them, unfortunately, going head to head in a super regional instead of Omaha, but it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, this is one, Mark and we recorded a podcast earlier this afternoon, and this is definitely the one where both sides of this matchup had to look around at all the upsets and regionals and what have you, and looked around like, are you serious? This is what we get this? Like this should be CWS finals, not right. Super regionals. I wonder, my thing quickly on Tennessee is I wonder if there's actually some benefit to the way they came through regionals, because I wonder if the way they won Monday, where they were able to have, Liam Doyle coming in and just throwing like fireballs up there, and like the emotional part of that, and just the Tony Vitello in the dugout, like talking about how psycho, Liam Doyle is, and just that whole scene, right? Like if they just kind of whistle through that regional 3-0 and don't really get pushed, and Wake plays in, that game the way they did in, against Miami, Ohio. And so they just roll them. I wonder if that's actually less helpful than the way they came through it, where now it feels like they've got like some juice back, right? Where they had to punch back and they were the antagonist, and, all this stuff that tends to fuel Tennessee. You never really want to get pushed to Monday, but I just can't help but wonder if maybe that's actually helpful in a weird way.
Joe, you want to do Arkansas? Kick us off there.
Yeah, this one feels pretty straightforward, where it was just, for a minute, Creighton toyed with them a little bit as they came out of that regional, but this really was pretty business-like for the Razorbacks as they got through it. And they'll have some interesting pitching stuff I think being a Saturday start, I think helps them. It helps Tennessee too, by the way, because Liam Doyle would get that extra day of rest. But, Arkansas went into the weekend starting Aiden Jimenez on Friday, and that didn't go great. North Dakota State, got to him a little bit, but with it being a Saturday start, they'll be able to just go with, Root to start off, and then Gage Wood behind him. And they're a little like LSU, and that if those two guys pitch pretty well, that might just, end up being too much, right? I guess the flip side is true at Tennessee as well. But my big thing with Arkansas is that they're actually one of the rare teams that I think their pitching staff has gotten deeper as the season has gone on, when most teams go the other direction. And part of that is guys getting healthy, right? Like Gage Wood has come back and has been himself, but also Parker Coyle pitched great over the weekend, 3 good relief innings, and they haven't had him for a while. And now that they have Gabe Gackle in the right spot, it feels like they almost like got a brand new pitcher versus the one they had in the starting rotation. So that's not an actual addition, but now that he's in the right spot, it feels like it's just better all around. So their pitching staff, I think, is as deep as we thought it was going to be. It just kind of took a circuitous route to get there and figure out who their guys are, because I don't think anybody had, arguably Aiden Jimenez as their MVP of the bullpen for the first 2/3 of the season. And yet there he was. So I have to imagine, I guess you could make the case for LSU, but I kind of wonder if, because this series is going to be so prominent, I have to imagine this is going to get I haven't looked at all the different regionals, what times and channels and all that stuff compared to each other, but I have to imagine this is going to get some pretty prime real estate on the network. So I think it's going to get a lot of eyeballs on it. And so I kind of think whoever comes out of this super regional doesn't mean they should be the favorite, but I think whoever comes out of the super regional, I think is going to end up being the betting favorite to win the national title. Because I just think everybody knows they're good. And then I think there's just going to be a lot of attention on this super regional. So I think the betting favorite will be whoever comes out of this one.
This series starts Saturday, by the way. Start times are 4 p.m. local and 2 p.m. local. Interesting.
Huh. Interesting.
Well,
boy, I would have thought night games.
Yeah, but on the weekend like
sure.
that, that's the
weekend.
prime time.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a Saturday and Sunday. That's right.
Sunday at 2 is like the optimal time you want.
I mean, if we're really going to nitpick game times, I continue to not necessarily understand why Auburn is starting at 9 Eastern and Corvallis is starting at 6 Eastern on the same day. I just, but I know there are more considerations that go into that other than time zone. So I don't want to be too harsh about it, but does kind of seem strange.
Yes. Hey, let's wrap it there, boys. That was, we really, we took my time limits and we threw them right out the window. We stomped on them, and that was fun. That was good. It was a good exercise. We, in a week. I hope
Mark is happy. I hope Mark is happy.
He was. He said that he was pleased with our adjustments.
We love you, buddy.
In a week, we will be in Omaha. We will be in the promised land. But for these teams, it's going to require 2 wins. It's the most pressurized weekend of the year in college baseball. It will be awesome. We'll have tons of great coverage on the site. Hey, for topics like Brian O'Connor going to Mississippi State, this is not the forum for that, but we will, when we get to Omaha, maybe we have a lot more airtime that we can unpack some of those things. Just right now, there's too many other things to cover. But the coaching carousel, obviously Martha, that's codename Kendall's phone, is all over it. If you're not
Coaching
following,
carousel, transfer portal.
yes,
Transfer portal's a little crazy right now.
hot boards. Yeah, it is.
Fitzy's
hot
been
board
trying to
season.
trade me. He wants to take over the portal work.
Hey, if I could also just real quick thank Martha for everything she does for the game. I would
Yes,
like to do that as well.
yes.
Here she
Martha.
is. She's
And
right
Martha,
here.
we
There
trust.
She is.
Yes. Love it. Gentlemen, good to see you. Safe travels, everybody. Enjoy super regional weekend. And that is it. We will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.